It's like rockin' music. So some of you, you might have had the same teacher I had. I had this teacher, Marty Ottenheimer, when I was a student here, started 20 years ago. And he taught anthropology in Umberger. I don't know if you guys remember Umberger, big room, 490 students would sit in there. And somehow the things that he was saying to me were changing my life and making me ask questions I'd never asked before. And those questions ended up taking me all over the world because the answers couldn't be found in books. It was like the great kind of question that leads you on a quest. And so then, as fate would have it, I actually got his job. I came back, and he was retiring just as I was getting my PhD, and I got his job, and I was actually standing in the same spot where I used to sit because Umberger had shifted. They redesigned Umberger, and now I'm standing in the very spot where I used to sit. And it's like this really amazing moment. And I'm talking to 450 students, and I'm thinking like, oh, I'm putting everything into this. Surely I'm inspiring them. They're going to go see the world. And so one day I thought, okay, I need to check in. Let's see what kinds of questions they're asking. So I came in about halfway through the semester, and I told them the same thing I just told you. I told them about Marty Ottenheimer, how he lit me up with questions. And I said, so what about you guys? Like, do you have any questions? And this guy rose his hand, and he says, do we get points for this? and then like after that, the next question was like, there was a test coming up. There was like, what's going to be on the test? I was like, oh. So I was like, this is no good. So then I started going. I realized I needed to like get to know my students better. So I started taking my lunch with students, and just about the time I started doing this, I'd invite students to my office. I just have like really deep conversations with them. And one girl came in one day, and she told me about when she was 8 years old. She's in the back seat of her car with her little brother, and her mom was doing flashcards for them. And her little brother was outdoing her on all the flashcards. She's 8 years old, and she thought, I'm just not smart. And that kind of stuck with her, and she started playing that role, like all the way through high school. And when I met her, she's in my office, and she said, I've been faking it so long, I don't even know who I am. And it struck me like, oh, there's the big question, like, who am I? And then I met another kid who had gone off to Florida to go to school, and it didn't work out, and he came back to K-State, he's a Kansas kid, and he's just trying to find his place in the world. I thought, oh, there's another big question. What's my place in the world? And I thought, is my big lecture hall speaking to those questions? And so then I thought, what would speak to those questions? What could I do? And I realized, anthropology is all about meeting people and engaging the world and putting yourself out there. And I thought, maybe we could do that right here. So I teamed up with Metal Arc Hills. It's a retirement community up on the hill from here. And as soon as I did, they welcomed me and actually led my students down the hall and showed them their own room, which they would live in for the next semester. And for the last 3 years, Metal Arc Hills has allowed my students to actually live in the retirement community every spring semester for the whole semester. And these students just dive into their lives, and they share so much. There's such a rich engagement across the generations. And in the process, they gather over 100 hours of material, and then they have to find a way to tell a great story about it so they can convey the transformations that they've had to a larger audience. And so here's one example of what a couple students did. They got over 100 hours material and then made this amazing 9-minute video in which they really dive into the lives of these residents. This is what it looks like.
I was born November the 12th, 1931.
No, I was born in 1934.
I was born in 1923.
I was born in 24.
Mother had all us children at home. Doctor came out and delivered us.
We were all born at home, no hospital.
I was born and raised on a farm.
Middle of the road, dryland farm. Dad always kept it up.
That was a very innocent time of my life.
And this is a 9-minute video, so I'm just speeding it up through the middle. But they really live the whole life that they hear. These people went to World War II. They were torn apart. Then they brought back together. They raised families together. And they really just threw themselves into these stories, right into retirement. And then that sad moment where they have to enter
when you're a
the home.
caregiver for a long time, it runs you down.
He went to sleep that night and never did wake up.
And he died the last part of January. He just died in his sleep, basically. He just looked just like he always did. But you can't get him back.
That was hard, because I really, really missed him.
Boy, I missed him. It just hit me that way. He wasn't here. To live in this world,
You must be able to do three things.
To love what is mortal,
hold it against your bones.
knowing that your own life depends on it.
and when the time comes,
To let it go.
let it go.
Is there anything else you want to say to the two 20-some-year-olds sitting here listening to your advice?
To the two 20-year-olds, I would say I would be happy if they could be my children. That I have loved them to death, and they would make perfect children.
So this film went on to have great success. It took them all the way to Paris, where it showed in a film festival, and thanks to philanthropy, they were able to go without spending any of their own money. and I'd like to introduce them now. This is Jordan Thomas and MacKenzie Wade.
Thank you. So normally when I prepare for a class, sorry, I buy a really expensive textbook and I look over the syllabus. But there was nothing that could have prepared me as a 19-year-old to leave the dorms and move into a retirement home. So I remember on my first day, I walk in, head held high, and I have a notepad in my hand, and I feel like this new age anthropologist who is descending into this elderly jungle. And within 2 seconds, I'm ambushed by this woman named Helen. And Helen, she's tiny. She has this really bright colored sweater on, a little pink bow in her hair, but she is attacking us with questions. Just everything about my 19-year-old life, she wants to know it. And at that point, I realized that I am going to be studied just as much as I was there to study them. So at first, living in Meadowlark was really hard because we viewed people like Helen just like homework. Because I was used to taking tests and taking notes. And as the semester moved along, suddenly I'd come home from class and I'd find cookies outside of my door. Or I'd check the clock and it was really late and I was still playing board games in the lobby. And then I'd wake up really early the next morning to have breakfast with the biscuits and gravy bunch. So after a while, it wasn't homework, but these were real relationships. And our video was a product of those real relationships.
I met Bonnie during the first couple weeks at Meadowlark Hills. I would go play board games with her and all of her friends at night, and she was the one who taught me all the skills and intricacies to dominoes and rummy cube. She usually let me win. Seriously, but as the semester moved along, Bonnie and I got a lot closer, and one day she invited me up to her room. I showed up, and the first thing I noticed was that her room was just full of boxes. So I ignored the clutter at first and sat down, and we got to talking. Then finally, I just asked her if she wanted some help unpacking. She immediately perked up and said, yeah, she'd love that. So I got to work, moving things around, unpacking boxes. And what I came to realize was that each box was just full of stories. So a piece of polished driftwood, for example, could just transport Bonnie back to a picnic beside the river with her husband after the war. And sometimes it's hard to explain exactly what it was like to live as a college student in a retirement home for a semester. But it might help you to imagine what it was like one morning when I came down to breakfast and I saw that Bonnie had a bruise covering half her face from where she had fallen trying to answer the phone that morning. She had gotten a concussion and the doctor didn't know if she was going to be okay yet. And I think it was in that moment that I realized we weren't at Meadowlark Hills just unboxing stories from the residents, but we had become active parts in this greater story that was continuously unfolding around us. So at Meadowlark Hills, we learned from books, just like in any other class. But the really deep learning, that came from our relationships with the residents.
So in our journey at K-State, Jordan and I found this intense wonder for the world around us. And that was just given to us by Dr. Wesch. So we're going to bring him back out.
Thanks. So I'm mostly just going to pay homage to them and tell you about kind of the structure of the class and what makes it different. So it's really kind of inspired by, let's see if I can find it here. Maybe the video seems to have been removed, I'm sorry. So it was inspired by this idea that grades maybe don't really capture a real experience. And I didn't want to just know my students as letters. You think about what happens when you grade people. You put these grades on them, and suddenly they're just known as letters, and they themselves see themselves as a letter grade. And if you get an A, you're kind of happy and maybe feeling kind of complacent. And you're not going to really work extra hard because you've already got that A. And the D's and F's feel disenfranchised and maybe just kind of give up altogether. And really, what happened was I got very inspired by my son George to change this. You look at what he's doing, and here he is, just trying to learn to go down steps, and I have 59 of these. I'm going to make you watch them all. And this just keeps going. This is months and months. Just keeps on trying, and at no point did I say that's a D. You're done. You can't redo it. And now he's done his A, and what does he do? He goes right back and he does it again. And he just keeps doing it because it's joyful and it's amazing, and that's what real learning is like. And so I wanted to create a sense of real learning. And so I thought about crafting a totally different vision for what learning could be. Instead of a syllabus where they turn in stuff and I grade it and then that's it, let's put them all at the base of a big mountain. And at the top of the mountain, we're going to make something worth it. And you're going to pitch it to them. You're going to say, come on this journey with me. This is going to be worth it. And then we start kind of break it down and say, okay, just come with me. I know it's a high mountain, but if you just follow me up, we'll go to, step 1, step 2, we'll get there. And they start climbing that mountain. And of course, some of them fall behind. And instead of giving them a D and saying you're doing, you get a 60%, that's it, you say, you're not there yet, but we're going to help you. We're going to help you get to that platform. We're not going to leave you behind. You're not going to be at 60% forever. Everybody's going to be 100%. And so people start helping each other. And they get up to that next platform. And pretty soon they start working together, and they find all kinds of new ways to work together. And I know these are just sketches, but for me, I see real events through all of these things. I see real people and the real struggles that we've gone through to create these projects. About midway through the project, we always kind of hit this point where things get really hard, and everybody's really kind of trying to make their way up this mountain. But we make it, and that struggle through it kind of bonds us together. And you start to see the top, and it's amazing toward the end of the semester the way people can hit their stride, and they go racing up to the top to that place that's worth it. But what's cool about this moment is that this is when they realize that final project they were doing is maybe not so final after all. That in fact, the real project was not the thing they created, but themselves. And that's what's really worth it. There's such a transformation process that can happen so that the project itself is so amazing and so beautiful, and I love watching it, but the real effect is what it does for the students and how it changes them. So that little kid from Florida is something different. He's transformed. That little kid from California is transformed. And they get there through all the bumps and falls, and they take joy in those falls. They take a different approach to failure, a different approach to success. Because the reality is we're not just training these kids just for jobs or to make a living. We're trying to help them make a life worth living. And to make a life worth living requires all kinds of skills that can't be taught just in something that can be found in a letter grade. So that kid who came here from Florida, and the Kansas kid came here from Florida, eventually, after that video, Jordan got on a bike. He started heading south, and he was trying to find his place in the world. And instead of just finding his place, he started paying attention to how other people were finding their place, how people from all over the world were finding their place. And it started to help him understand where he was at. And then Kenzie, that little girl who, decided she wasn't smart when she was 8, traveled the world as well and smartened up a bit, realized just how smart she really is and all the talent she has. This is a thing that she's actually started a business they're both starting, in which they're trying to create sustainable proteins from insect proteins. And it's already taking off, and it's just amazing to see them go out into the world with such courage and do something they're so passionate about. Because again, it's not the project, it was all about them, and it just couldn't happen without all of us sort of wrapping our arms around them and lifting them up and giving them the support they need. And so I want to thank you for all of that.